All right, well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 2021 Virtual Piedmont Legacy Trails Summit. My name is Palmer McIntyre. I'm with the Piedmont Land Conservancy and Piedmont Legacy Trails Initiative. We're super happy to have you all here this morning. Our Trail Summit is typically a regional event, but since we're virtual this year, we're thrilled to have so many people representing such a diversity of places across North Carolina and maybe even outside of North Carolina. And what a year to be talking about trails. They've certainly been a hot topic during this pandemic and clearly demonstrating their vital importance to our communities. So we hope that the topics that we're bringing to you through this virtual Trails Summit will help further trails in all our communities. A little background, Piedmont Legacy Trails is a regional trails collective serving 12 counties in the Piedmont Triad of North Carolina. Our purpose is to promote and support trails all across our region. And one of the ways we do that is by holding an annual Trails Summit on relevant topics. We also promote trails through social media. We have a regional trail finding map on our website, piedmonttrails.org. And we've published or are in the process of publishing county-based trail guides and a regional Blueways guide. Our topic today is trail funding strategies, and we have a great set of speakers for you. But first, I'd like to introduce our Piedmont Legacy Trails team. We have Brianna Hafferman with Piedmont Land Conservancy.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here.
And we have Jesse Day with the Piedmont Triad Regional Council.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming today.
So next slide, Brianna. This year's Trail Summit is coming to you in a 4-part series, Friday mornings in March. And here's what's ahead for this month. We're super excited about all of our topics, and we invite you back for these other presentations. And then also don't forget there is an option for afternoon field trips each of the Fridays in March at different spots throughout our region. So all the registration information is on our website, piedmonttrails.org. We're able to deliver these webinars completely free to you all, thanks to our sponsors, local government, Federal Credit Union, Arete Structures, Duke Energy, Destination by Design, McAdams, Stewart, Alta, and Piedmont Triad Transportation Professionals and the North Carolina chapter of the American Planning Association. And of course, Piedmont Triad Regional Council and Piedmont Land Conservancy as lead agencies behind this. So first, a few housekeeping items. We ask that you do stay on mute for the majority of the webinar simply because we have so many folks. But if you have questions, please put them in the chat. We'll make sure we get to them. Jesse Day is our moderator today, and we are recording the webinar. So there will be a link and you can go back and review it and share it with others. We'll post it on our website, but also deliver it right into your inbox. And if you're looking for credits for planning or PE, that information is here, and we'll also put that into the chat. But before we get started, I'd like to introduce our lead sponsor, the local government Federal Credit Union. We have Leanna Lott here today with us this morning. She's the Credit Union's Senior Membership Development Officer. She'll say a few words, but first we're going to show a short video. Thank you, Leanna.
There are thousands of local government employees in North Carolina, and many are members of Local Government Federal Credit Union, or LGFCU. As an employee of a local government, you qualify to join LGFCU too. LGFCU is a credit union, and simply put, it's a better way to bank without using a bank. When you become a member of LGFCU, you're joining more than 300,000 local government employees across the state. Members of LGFCU are the credit union's owners. Each member has a vote. And instead of answering to shareholders and investors like a bank, the credit union is member-focused. Any profits made by the credit union are passed back to members for lower rates, higher dividends on deposits, and expanded financial products and services. LGFCU has been helping members achieve their financial goals since 1983. For that reason, LGFCU has contracted with State Employees Credit Union, or SECU, to deliver branch and ATM services to its members. While LGFCU and SECU are two separate credit unions, our partnership allows LGFCU members to enjoy full service at SECU's more than 250 branches and nearly 1,100 Cash Points ATMs across the state. Or you can access your accounts, apply for loans, and more with online banking anytime, anywhere. LGFCU can help you keep more of your hard-earned money by offering affordable loan rates, fewer fees, competitive dividends on deposits, and lots of great products and services. Got questions? Talk to one of our friendly membership development officers. They're part of a network of LGFCU representatives across the state who live and work near you. Or reach out to us anytime. If you're ready to join LGFCU, just take a pay statement or employee badge to a nearby branch. Find your closest branch at lgfcu.org/locations. Explore why LGFCU is a better way to bank. Visit lgfcu.org. LGFCU is an equal housing opportunity lender and federally insured by NCUA.
So good morning. I'm going to just briefly speak. My name is Leanna Lott. As Palmer told you, I'm a senior membership development officer with Local Government Federal Credit Union, and we are so proud and honored to be a sponsor
This past year, adversity met its match.
of this
Yes, the
Piedmont
pandemic
Trails
caused
Virtual
closures
Summit.
and catapulted us into
We're
remote
so
learning.
excited to
This
be
challenge-
able to bring this to folks that may not have been able to attend. And like Palmer said, it's reaching out across the state and probably beyond state borders, which is great. So Local Government Federal Credit Union is a credit union that serves city and county government employees, volunteers, and their immediate families here in North Carolina. So even if you aren't a full or part-time employee of a local government entity, if you volunteer, let's say we've got someone that volunteers with the Piedmont Triad Regional Council, or you volunteer with your local Parks and Rec department, that makes you eligible to join. Local elected officials, folks that serve on park and recreation boards, those folks are considered eligible for membership with us. So the membership reaches out far beyond just local government employees, and that's how we're able to grow. We have a little over 370,000 members. And we are very pleased with the relationship that we have with SECU to be able to use their branch network statewide. So we're here to support local governments and those employees and their family members as any way that we are able to. So whether that be by just providing a savings account or being able to provide financial counseling, tax preparation services, scholarships. So we cover the gamut when it comes to products and services, and we want to be here to be the person that you can turn to anytime your financial well-being isn't exactly where you think it should be. So again, we're honored and so proud to be here as a sponsor for today's session for the trails, and hope you enjoy this. If you ever have any questions, please contact your local state employees credit union branch, or you can contact lgfcu.org. That is our website, and we'll be more than happy to help you. So thank you, Palmer.
Thank you, Leanna. Appreciate so much your support and all the support from all the sponsors. Thank y'all. So without further ado, let's dive into today's topic, trail funding strategies. We have three speakers representing three very different avenues for funding trail projects. So first up, we have Joe Furstenberg with NCDOT's Integrated Mobility Division. Second, we have Scott Crocker, the director of the NC Trails Program within NC State Parks. And then third, we have Pete Ishelman coming to us all the way from Roanoke, Virginia. He's the director of outdoor branding with the Roanoke Regional Partnership. And we look forward to hearing about all the neat and exciting things they're doing up there. So Joe, we're going to turn it over to you.
Okay, sounds great. If you guys can hear me, will you give me a quick thumbs up? Awesome. Seeing some thumbs up, I'll go ahead and dive in here. So thanks, Palmer. And I'm so happy to be here with you all this morning to provide statewide policy and programmatic updates from NCDOT that impact funding opportunities for multimodal facilities. And I'll provide an update on the NCDOT Complete Streets policy and funding implications. I'll then give a quick update and overview of the Great Trail State Plan development and provide some resources for bicycle and pedestrian funding opportunities through the project prioritization process. And just real quickly before I dive in here, I know we have a diverse group attending today. So some of you may know this already and some may not, but NCDOT recently, the Bicycle and Pedestrian Division and the Public Transportation Division merged to become the Integrated Mobility Division. So we are aligning our strategic priorities to enhance statewide bicycle, pedestrian, and transit planning. We're being more involved at the MPO and RPO level, as well as with our division offices to provide some technical assistance, as well as enhancing support for grant administration, safety, and compliance. And the merger process itself, I think, is probably just a great first example of how in the past few years, NCDOT has made some policy and programmatic shifts that we believe will have great impacts on the future of multimodal facility planning, design, and development in North Carolina. So we can go ahead and go to next slide. All right, so let me first talk about complete streets and what are complete streets. So just really quickly, I'll say there's really no singular design prescription for what a complete street is. Each one is unique and responds to its community context in a different way. So a complete street may include sidewalks, bike lanes, special bus lanes, comfortable and accessible public transportation stops, frequent and safe crossing opportunities, median islands, curb extensions. There's a whole a bucket of elements that can be included into what a complete street would be. And a complete street in a rural area will look different from a complete street in a highly urban area, but both are designed to balance the safety and convenience for everyone using that facility. And complete streets matter. And I hope through this presentation, I can illustrate that to you. And I believe it's an attainable goal that we have for our roadways at NCDOT. And as a steward of the majority of those roadways, I think this policy shift that we made enhances our commitment for the inclusion of these elements in our projects. And we're also meeting Executive Order 80, which is North Carolina's commitment to address climate change and transition to a clean energy economy with our complete streets policy. And the goal of that executive order was to reduce emissions from all sources to below 2005 levels. So NCDOT and other agencies are preparing plans to meet that, and complete streets is one component of our approach. And, and from the last slide, there's a really quick edit said, if each North Carolinian could walk or bike 1 mile a week instead of driving, it would eliminate 218,000 tons of CO2 from the air every year, which I think is really telling about the impacts we can have beyond just providing facilities with complete streets. You can go to the next slide. So today, about 68% of North Carolina's population is driving. And by 2030, nearly half of that population will be in the age ranges where driving is either not an option or a diminishing option. And millennials will make up the largest portion of North Carolina's driving population by 2035. Hope that doesn't scare too many folks. And next slide. We also have 9.4% of all pedestrian crashes are fatal. This makes up 13% of all roadway crash fatalities. And part of that issue comes from a lack of facilities. And these numbers are relatively unchanged over the past 5 years, moving North Carolina into the 7th highest in total fatalities in the country. But I should say quickly that we are working to get the 2020 numbers, because as you all are probably aware, we had quite an adjustment in our year and our approach. And we did see a lot more folks, number one, not driving, and more folks getting out being pedestrians and bicyclists and using those facilities. So I will just say that we are working with the UNC Highway Safety Research Center currently on aggregating our 2020 data. And the most current data we have is up to 2019, and it's hosted on NCDOT's website, our bicycle and pedestrian crash data. So that 2020 data will be coming soon. And next slide. We also had to consider the landscape of mobility and how it's changing. We saw micromobility invade urban downtowns almost overnight in 2019 and 2018. Of course, we saw a slowdown last year, but I think all of those companies are set to make a big comeback as we come out of the pandemic. And suburban and rural quality of life and greenway expansions have grown across North Carolina. And we're also seeing economic development demands from companies to have alternative forms of transportation for its workforce. And obviously there are health and physical benefits to access to trails and facilities for exercise that meets our priorities and also the priorities of other state departments, and the expansion of EV technology. Pictured on the bottom right here, you can see an Ollie. We have a very similar EV that was launched in 2019 and 2020 on NC State's campus. And we're going to soon be relaunching that at the Wright Brothers Memorial in the Outer Banks. So more information on that will be coming soon. And next slide. So where we came from and where we're going with complete streets. So we did have an existing complete streets policy with NCDOT. The policy was adopted at that time in 2009, and it had a paired document with the Complete Streets Planning Design Guidelines in July of 2012. And next slide. But to see where we've gone and what changes took place in 2019 with our update of the Complete Streets policy, we worked with our consultant group to pull together what is called the core technical team, which I'll show on a later slide. And we also worked with a consultant team on the update and the action plan for implementation of the Complete Streets policy. And so we have in that development process, we have an action plan that we continue to work through. We had the Complete Streets policy itself that was updated in August 2019. We developed a Complete Streets implementation guide for internal and external partners, as well as FAQs. And there's also a Complete Streets project sheet I'll talk about later, and more online training website resources. And next slide. So just quickly, here are some highlights for I think that illustrate the change in the direction for the Complete Streets policy and the change in direction for NCDOT. Is that, you know, we're shifting our priorities to look at access, mobility, and safety needs for all ranges and abilities, all users. And we're requiring that our planners and designers consider and incorporate multimodal facilities in the design improvement of all appropriate transportation projects in North Carolina. And that also includes a deeper collaborations with the cities, towns, and communities that we are putting and building projects in. Next slide. So one of the ways that we're doing that, and one of the biggest changes in the policy, was that we built in some enforcement power into the policy in terms of the project development process within NCDOT. And so we, as part of that update process, we developed what's called the Complete Streets project sheet. And as we are working to implement, there is some different variations of how this project sheet comes into play in terms of new program projects, as the prioritization process for Piece 6.0 is, we're reviewing those right now. And then obviously we had projects that were already programmed before the Complete Streets policy update. So I will say for all NCDOT projects that didn't have a final environmental document signed before August 2019, they are subject to this policy update. And all prioritization projects from P6.0 moving forward will have a Complete Streets project sheet as part of the required documentation for project submittal. But the Complete Streets project sheet also serves as a vehicle for providing exceptions to the policy. We understand there are some situations across the state where that may come into play with one facility type or the other. You know, unique site constraints, the distance from existing or planned facilities, you know, if there's no existing transit service, and all of these are provided with more information in the FAQs and implementation guide document. And next slide. So looking at how the Complete Streets policy impacts the project development and design process with NCDOT, it includes a bigger conversation of other sort of programmatic shifts and changes that have happened inside the department. We have had, it's called the Integrated Project Delivery Process through our Technical Services Division. They have worked to develop what is called the NCDOT Project Delivery Network, which I'll show a snapshot of in a later slide, that incorporates review elements and required stages for review for Complete Streets elements. We also have the Project Atlas Workbench, which is basically a big data management tool that NCDOT has put together for internal. I think we are expanding to some external partners with that as well, in terms of pulling all of our, I think there's over 800 data layers in that GIS system that we can have access to when we're you know, reviewing, designing, scoping a project. And just other programmatic updates that I'll talk about later. But I think one part of the policy language that I wanted to highlight that I think is crucial for the implementation and its impact for how we build more multimodal facilities across the state is that our project engineers are required to coordinate with NCDOT's Integrated Mobility Division on all programmed highway projects. So I'll show in a later slide, actually I think it's our next slide, I'll show you how that process change happens. And so I've got a couple arrows. So if you'll hit next, and I think you have to hit it twice and they'll pop up. There you go. So what we're looking at, I know you're probably like, I can't read any of that. What's going on with this slide? I will tell you that it is hosted online, so you can view all this and it's interactive and you can click on it. This is the NCDOT Project Delivery Network that was developed as part of that IPD update process. And we worked closely with that team as they developed this. And actually, I have a meeting later this afternoon about the 2.0 version. So we continue to work with them as we implement this. But you'll see in stage one, in project initiation, we have a review of complete streets. That's where we will provide a review of the complete streets project sheet, making sure that all of the local, regional, and state plans were included in that initial element, and also provide some initial scoping guidance and resources back at that time. And then in alignment defined in the stage two process, where we verify complete streets, that is a design concurrence point where the project managers and engineers will reach back out. It's a more in-depth review where we're actually looking at preliminary designs and getting into the weeds of, what facility type and at what width and what buffer, that sort of thing. So we have built this review process into the project development and design process, which strengthens that and strengthens the complete streets policy to help move those facilities forward and make sure that we're including the best and most appropriate facilities across the state. And next slide. So the complete streets policy also has implications. Ooh, is a hard word to say on a Friday morning, for resurfacing and maintenance. So we are, and when I say we, the Integrated Mobility Division is coordinating with NCDOT's Operation Program Management Unit, and we are working with them to view the highway maintenance improvement plans that we put out. There's an annual 5-year resurfacing list that's distributed to each local government, where resurfacing is scheduled or anticipated over the next 5-year period. So we're currently working with them and some other stakeholders to develop a methodology for review of the HMIP for complete streets elements and opportunities, and flagging those and identifying those as we move through our resurfacing and maintenance plans throughout the year and throughout the 5-year outlook for how we can get quick wins like shown here from Belmont. We were able to take some space and provide a bike lane without having to do a major overhaul of the road. So that was done through, with paint, we can provide a facility. And then a more in-depth sort of road diet shown there on the right from Charlotte. You can see how we went from a 4-lane facility that had some sidewalks on the side, but no on-road facilities, to a 2-lane facility, bike lanes on both sides. We've got a mid-block crossing and some traffic calming that was put in. So this is a good example of how complete streets is going through every process and impacts every process within the NCDOT, from planning all the way to construction and maintenance. And next slide. So I also think it's important to point out that our complete streets elements in our policy are designed to be in accordance with the best and most recent guidance from our partners in AASHTO, NACTO, FHWA, and our own roadway design manual. So don't hold me to any of these dates, because I can tell you they've changed for the past 2 years every time I've asked. But we do anticipate the AASHTO bicycle guide to come out fall of this year. I said that last year, and I'll say it again this year, just to hope that it comes out from AASHTO. We're also looking at the AASHTO pedestrian guide probably in late 2021 or 2022. And then also we have like I've mentioned, there's various different guides from NACTO, and FHWA continues to provide great guidance in terms of rural and urban considerations. And I think another important piece and another piece of our programmatic shifts and update is that we are currently working with the roadway design unit of NCDOT on an update to the roadway design manual. And I think it's important to point out that, if you're familiar with our current roadway design manual, I think you'll know that there's probably not much in terms of multimodal facility guidance provided in that manual. But I can tell you that the changes that we are making and suggesting with that group are going to provide that in that design manual, and it will be, our own authoritative source providing that with linking to those authoritative sources from AASHTO, NACTO, FHWA, and some others mixed in. So, and also I do just want to point out that our bridge policy is incorporated in part of our roadway design manual. So that is being updated in accordance. But, you can see there on the left, we did eliminate some of our older policies with this policy update, but we pulled the good items from those old policies, such as from we had the guideline for the inclusion of Greenway accommodation underneath the bridge. That will continue. So, we're providing that space underneath the bridge deck for the future construction of Greenway facilities, or even, constructing those facilities inside the NCDOT right away of a project when we can connect existing segments. And next slide. So I think this slide really illustrates the funding implications of the complete streets policy. So we see a big shift here, looking at all of the facilities, and obviously the impetus for the Complete Streets policy is that on the local, regional, and state level that we are doing and providing effective planning. And when you see on the left here for that little arrows, pedestrian facilities, bicycle facilities, side path, greenway crossing, and transit facilities, which I do want to say that's not transit centers per se, but more the on-road transit facilities. So if those are identified in a local, state, or regional adopted plan, then NCDOT will pay the full cost of those. Maintenance inside of municipalities' jurisdiction will go to the municipality, and an agreement will need to be set up just as it was previously. But NCDOT will pay for those, the construction and installation of those facilities. If it's not in a plan, but the need is identified through the scoping process, the cost share will apply at that point, and I'll show a breakdown of those percentages on the next slide. And also, if there are betterments which are further defined in the implementation guidance, the municipality at that point would pay the full cost. And I just, I think it's important to show that we flipped the narrative here. We no longer have it to where you have to provide justification of why we would include multimodal facilities in our projects, but now we flip the narrative so that you have to provide justification as to why you wouldn't include those facilities, and it is subject to review even from that point. So we built in mechanisms with the policy to ensure that we are addressing this and that multiple eyes are going on the decision to move forward or not move forward. And next slide. So this shows a breakdown of the cost share formula and the betterments that I mentioned earlier. And so you can see here that the percentages were updated to decrease the overall financial obligation for the local share and increase the NCDOT share. So that was also a change that this policy made. And the betterment details are there. And I will say there is more in the implementation guide language hosted on our website. But, and I do just want to mention, because it's something we had a lot of questions about. The Complete Streets policy didn't change or have any impacts on the landscaping or lighting policy for NCDOT. They're just mentioned here because that is just a recurring example of a type of betterment that's included. So just mentioning those policies, we didn't make any changes to them, but they still come into effect here. And next slide. So we continue, as I mentioned, we continue to implement policy. We continue to have conversations, like I mentioned, with our maintenance and operations group. And on that action plan document, we had over 30 action items to continue to implement the Complete Streets policy forward. And I'm happy to say that last month we had a core technical team meeting, and we were able to provide an update to that group to show where majority of our action items are actually already complete or are pending. So we have started the conversation on all those items. There's a couple additional policy items that we are continuing to work with and get updated. And as we continue to do all this, I also want to point out that metrics and tracking is a big part of what we're doing, and how we want to take an approach here, because I think it's so important to be able to point to the data that shows, number one, what was our planned facility, what was actually constructed, how did the project move, what were the decisions that were made. I think those are all very important as we move forward into the future for providing even further justification for multimodal facilities. And next slide. So this is a quick snapshot of what the core, or who the members of the core technical team are. And the core technical team is tasked with the management and administration of the Complete Streets policy. So I think it's important to note that it's not an integrated mobility policy. It's an NCDOT policy, and it was adopted by the NCDOT board. And there is department-wide buy-in and structures being built in from these various divisions and departments across NCDOT to ensure its implementation. Okay, next slide. So I'm just very quickly just going to switch gears here and talk a little bit about the Great Trails State Plan and how this plan has implications for funding and how it fits into the bigger picture here. I'll say I know that I think a lot of you were involved in the development of this plan, and we're on the stakeholders group, so you're probably very well aware. It's been decades in the making, and I'm just going to provide some quick overview of where we are and what's to come with the Great Trails State Plan. So you can go to the next slide. So just a quick overview if you aren't familiar. So really the stage was set in 2016 and 2017 with partnerships with the ITRI from NC State and also NC State Parks to have a better understanding of the economic impact of trails and shared use paths. Following today, you'll all receive a PDF of my slides. So the links that are shown here, you'll be able to click in and read these reports. And actually, if we go to the next slide, you'll be able to see really the numbers, I think, speak for themselves here. You know, the studies here, the economic impact study focused on 4 trail and greenway segments: the American Tobacco Trail, the Brevard Greenway, the Duck Trail in Duck, North Carolina, and the Little Sugar Creek Greenway. And like I said, I think the numbers speak to themselves, and we're really starting to see that shift in approach and thought, I think, in regards to how these facilities add economic and community value at the local level. Okay, next slide. So just really quickly about the Great Trails State Plan and how that trail network was developed. So we worked with our existing data to start out with in early 2020. We pulled in our existing plans, whether they were local or regional plans or plans that we through Ncdot had funded. And then we also looked at our draft plan network and compared that with 14 division level stakeholder meetings, which probably many of you were involved in. We also worked to confirm that with data and to update our data to identify the gaps and alternatives, and looking across the divisions at how that we can make connections. And next slide. And then finally, we're reviewing those gaps and alternatives, and and we're at the stage now where we're getting ready to. I think we've had to delay by 1 week, but we're getting ready to post the plan out for final public comments. And also to our stakeholder group. So that is all. I would say next week there will be more information for those folks that are involved in that, and we'll also be posting that public comment on the Ncdot website. And this slide right here shows, and I'll make a plug for the Main Street conference that's coming up later, because we're also providing a more in-depth presentation on the Great Trail State Plan there. But just to show the connection between the NC Main Street communities and overlaid with the proposed Great Trail State Network. And you can see the bold green lines are the proposed GTS network. Then we have the alternative routes that are dotted lines, our ferry connections. And then you can also see some of the gaps that we know already exist. And then the lighter green shows the existing shared use paths. So, I think it's just important to show the linkages that we have between our Main Street communities and how we can connect those through investing in trails and side paths and shared use paths. And next slide. So I think it's important to understand as I wrap up things here to show that the Complete Streets policy didn't create a new source of funding for these elements. Instead, the Ncdot board, by passing this policy update in 2019, made it clear that Ncdot should be providing these facilities as part of our highway and some non-highway projects when we've identified the need in the plan. It may result in maybe less overall projects because maybe our total project cost is greater, but we will have more complete projects across the state and projects that will address all users' needs. We're working with this policy to eliminate the potential for gaps in our multimodal network, due to a lack of local cost share funding, or and looking at community and region has planned for these facilities. We're taking some of those elements that may have been barriers before off the table. And I think it's important to look at how we continue to work with maintenance, and we continue to work with our bridges and policies like that to ensure that we aren't building in deficiencies or barriers, like I said, across the state. So I think we're moving in the right direction. And so my last slide here, which is probably, I think this slide could probably have, it's on an hour presentation, and I won't pretend to be a total expert on all of these, but these are some of the more traditional funding sources for bicycle and pedestrian projects in our state, and they're governed by the Strategic Transportation Investments, or STI law, which I think probably the best way is to think about this is to break it down into that funding is broken down into buckets. So the first 3 are statewide mobility, regional impact, and divisions needs. And then we have, of course, our bicycle and pedestrian projects are eligible in the division needs category. So that's broken down even further. So in the division needs category, we have TAP funding. That's the Transportation Alternatives Program funding. It authorized funding for programs and projects defined as transportation alternatives, including on and off-road, pedestrian and bicycle facilities, infrastructure projects for improving non-driver access to public transportation, enhanced mobility, community improvement activities such as historic preservation, vegetation management, environmental mitigation, recreational trail projects, safe routes to school projects, projects for planning, design, and construction boulevards and other roadways, largely in the right of way of former divided highways. So there's a lot of different elements, and you will be able to, again, when you have the PDF of these slides, you'll be able to click and it'll take you right to more in-depth information for all of these. The Surface Transportation Program, the Surface Transportation Block Grant Program provides funding for states and localities for projects to preserve and improve conditions and performance on any federal aid highway, bridge, or tunnel project on any public road, and pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure and transit capital projects, including intercity bus terminals. Cmac funding, which I think maybe people are probably most familiar with, is funding that's used for a transportation project or program that's likely to contribute to the attainment or maintenance of national ambient air quality standards with a high level of effectiveness in reducing air pollution, included in an NPO and RPO's current transportation plan or improvement plan. And then also the Highway Safety Improvement Program, which looks at funds the installation of vehicle to infrastructure communication equipment, pedestrian hybrid beacons, roadway improvements to provide separation between pedestrians and motor vehicles, medians and pedestrian crossing islands, and there's some other physical infrastructure projects that are eligible. And again, all of those, there's more information at the links for all of those. And I think each one of them could probably have their own hour-long presentation just to get all the details out. So I won't bore you all with that this morning. So, and then go to our last slide there. And I just before we turn it over to questions, I just want to try to bring everything full circle here. So I would say, within the last 3 to 4 years, NCDOT has made some great strides in updating our policy and our programmatic functions, from the Complete Streets Policy Update, the IPD Project Development Network, Project Atlas coming online, and also looking at updates to the MUTCD. This is our manual on uniform traffic control devices, updated at the federal level, and also the update of the NCDOT roadway design manual. So all of these things are coming together to support the inclusion of multimodal facilities in our projects and across our state, as indicated by the planning efforts such as the Great Trail State Plan. We continue to invest in research and make the most informed choices with the best data we have available to us. And we're seeing priorities, I think, at the federal level shift with the new administration. And I think that support for further inclusion and hopefully additional funding opportunities for bike ped transit and micromobility transportation will be presented in the future as well. So I know that was a lot to throw at everybody this morning, but I'd be happy now to take some time for some questions, and I'll do my best to provide an answer. And if not, I will follow up with somebody who can.
Great, thanks, Joe. I'll handle a couple of questions that came through in the chat. We're a little bit limited on time, so I think we'll just have to stick to maybe one or two of those. Just a couple of comments. One is looking at, and first of all, thank you so much for coming back to the region to present to our group. Just about incorporating shade trees into Complete Streets guidelines or guidance that may go to local communities that you're working with. There's a question about how the funding percentage for bike ped and transit may change with this from Dabney and Greensboro, change with folks that are driving less. And I know you spoke a little bit about some change at the federal level that may be more of a federal side of things, but what are you hearing at the state level in terms of changing funding percentage for bike ped and transit?
Yeah, I mean, I think that certainly it's the conversations are ongoing as we work with the new administration and as they are rolling out their new priorities. I think it's pretty clear. I think the infra grant opportunity that was posted most recently from USDOT and FHWA, I think sort of the priorities that they have and the requirements that they have for that grant program, I think are reflective of what we're going to continue to see in terms of priorities for putting funding towards things like multimodal and public transportation facilities. So it's hard to say what all they have coming down the pipeline, but I think the outlook is positive for sure in terms of expanding those opportunities.
Great, thanks, Joe. Well, I think we need to move on just to save time for the other presenters. Again, thanks so much, and then we'll get the presentation out. If there's any links you wanted to share, Joe, in the chat box today, I know a couple folks were asking about links today. So if you have the ability to do that, I think that would be appreciated by by some of our attendees, but we'll move over and shift to invite Scott Crocker to share his screen and present on recreational trails program funding and what he's seeing from the state parks level for trail funding. So Scott, thanks for joining us today. We're really excited to hear what you have to say.
Thanks, Jesse. I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm excited to be here. It's a great time to be talking about trails just in the nation and North Carolina as well. You know, we were involved, we partnered with the DOT and the Federal Highway Administration. I work for state parks and the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources. So we have a lot of people that come together to make this happen. And I am the Recreational Trails Program administrator for the state, as well as being the state parks trails program manager. So I kind of wear two hats, managing the program and then also just dealing with all the state park trail needs. So I'll give a rundown just kind of about our program and about the recreational trails program. And this is going to be a real quick overview. I just want to talk about the program. And I like to really hit on some of the pitfalls that happen to grant applicants, because I imagine a lot of people in here are going to be potentially applying for grant funding. So just what I want to hit today is talk about, first of all, our website, trails.nc.gov. That is that right there. We're gonna just talk about that briefly. Anything you need from us should be found on that website, and contact information on grant funding, on the grant application process and all of that. So go to that website. So I want to talk about the RTP grant cycle timeline, kind of show you very quickly what GMS is all about. It's our new online grant management system. It's pretty industrial, pretty government, I'll say right up front, but we will walk you through it and help you turn in your applications. So one big thing I can't stress enough is tell us the story of your project. If you are applying for funding, give us a good story. And I don't mean make one up. I mean, really tell us the story of how that project is going to help wherever you're applying for, wherever you live. And some trends in the trails program, in the RTP program. So that is our website. It has everything you need right there. You should be able to find it, who to contact, who to work with, and all of that. So I'll go through that. But this is what the trails program is. We have the trail funding branch that we deal with grant funding. We also have regional trail planning that we work with when we're dealing with the Great Trails State Initiative and all that. And we also give out technical assistance inside the park, also outside the park, especially if you receive a grant. We will come try to help you a little bit. We can't give you all of our time. We can't be your personal trail designer necessarily, but as much as we would love to, because there's the best part of our job is getting out in the field and figuring out a new trail, but we can't just do that for everyone. But we will help you get started if you do receive a grant. And we spend an awful lot of our time. If anybody's been on any of the trails in state parks, you know, it's my staff that's responsible for identifying the problems and identifying how to fix it. And so that's what we spend a lot of our time trying to troubleshoot, is all the trails. We all kind of inherited the trails. You know, a lot of trails are old road beds and things like that. So we spend a lot of our time trying to improve our trail system. All right, so this is the staff right here. Smith Rayner is not report directly to me, but she works a lot statewide and we work with her. She's in our planning department now, but she does a lot with regional trail planning and state trails. So that is my staff. We have a mountain region, Piedmont region, and coastal region. And then I have a grants manager that will help you with some of the technical parts, especially once you get the grant, and then myself. So this is the, we've had a lot of questions about this. We're trying to do some updates to our grant management system and select our meeting dates. So we're a little bit late trying to figure out exactly when we wanted to go live, but the last word I heard is that we're going to go live today. We were trying to make one change to our application. Every year I learn something new I want to have in the application, or something we report out on. We had to report out on to federal highways. We report out to a lot of people. So every time somebody asks for a new report, I think of something else I want to add to the application for the data for us to be able to mine later. So this is my best guess right now for our dates. I ran it past my staff. Everything looks pretty good. If there are any changes, they will be on our website and it'll be really, really clear. But Today, we're going to shoot to get that live. And what you'll need to do though is if you have never done it, you have to sign up for the grant management system. You have to get an ID and that sort of thing. So we usually do a spring and a late fall meeting. Each meeting we will consider safety and education applications. We're only doing the final applications that we get are going to be decided in November, and grant awards go out in December. So we're doing something a little bit different with our cycle. We used to have a pre-app and a final app, and unfortunately, one of the problems with the pre-app is it didn't have quite as much information. It didn't have a budget. There's certain things that weren't in there, and we're like, you know what, we really need all of that information, even if it modifies somewhat after you turn it in. So what we're offering to people now, and it worked really well last year, is we're offering kind of a soft deadline. And if you can apply by September 24th here, I'm sorry, that's the final deadline. If you can apply by July 30th, that gives us a couple of months. So before the final app is due. So we can take a look at your project and really look at your maps, look at your project, consider that what you would want to turn in for your final. You may not have heard about some of your permitting decisions. You may not have got some of the feedback on environmental requirements, but you should have a fully developed application. And we can look at your maps. We can look at your, everything that's in that application and give you feedback. So that's something that was really helpful for people last year. And I think that really got us some strong applications. Because if we just have a final deadline, even when we had the pre-app, we had the budget. That was the first time we saw the budget if the people have not, the applicants have not been working with the trail specialists. So there's a few pitfalls I'll talk about. And one of the big things is not working with your trail specialists. So work with your regional trail specialists. They are going to help you. All right, so what is the RTP program? I won't spend a lot of time on this, but essentially it's a federal grant program. Your gas taxes pay for it. I'll just say that very briefly. That's where it comes from, but it's from off-highway vehicle. We have a required component. We have to give 30% of our money to off-highway vehicle projects. So we'll touch on that in a second. But permissible uses, new trail, greenway. Greenways, it doesn't go very far. Greenways are popular right now, but we have a $100,000 grant program that I'll touch on in a second, and it doesn't get you very far on a greenway. It might buy you a nice bridge to get over a creek on a greenway. So we also have approved trail facilities, trailhead markers, tools. That's not as often used, but land acquisition sometimes. Again, it's not the most popular use of the funding, and the committee has to decide on it. But you are also allowed to have up to 10%. If you have a $100,000 grant, you can use up to 10 grand for permitting, design, planning, that sort of thing. So you do have to match. That is one of the requirements. You have to match. So our favorite is just to make it real simple and clean, do a cash match and just pay for, it's an 80-20 program. So if you get $100,000, you got to put up $25,000. Now, but it can also be force account labor, volunteer labor, land donation, planning. If you spent money on a trail design within 18 months of receiving the award, you could use that as part of your match. So we do try to, and that's a really great thing to do. Come up with a good, strong project and have it be part. If you can show that your project is part of a design, part of a plan for a park or whatnot, that's great. I mean, it just really makes for strong projects. So that's the basics right here. So $10,000 to $100,000, 25% match. It is a reimbursement program. So these things are very important to know. You don't just get the money and it goes into an account. You actually have to spend it and then request for reimbursement. We're doing all of that online now, and it's been working pretty well. So it's open to government agencies and nonprofits, essentially. So it does have to be public land. We've been approached by people in the past, but it wasn't truly public land, or maybe it's a neighborhood trail that not everybody can get to. We can't pay for your gated community trail. It's this is public funds. All right, and I'll say briefly, just the safety and education grant. We will look at those applications at each of our meetings. We don't get so many of them, and they're pretty easy to look them over. So I would say that this is probably the least utilized part of our program is the safety and education funds. You can spend up to $5,000. It can be a max of $5,000. but there's a lot of good uses for that. You know, workshops, if you have part of a, if you're part of a volunteer club or a, you know, club that takes care of our trails and that sort of thing, we have a lot of clubs use this funding to get their chainsaw training every year. It pays for speakers sometimes for different kinds of meetings when we can go back and actually have public speakers and do conferences again someday. It can pay for speaker fees and that sort of thing. So underutilized, but really, you know, it's really a good use of these funds. So we have a dedicated pot of money that is just for this. So we could fund up, you know, more than 50, or I'm sorry, not 50. We could fund more than up to almost 20 projects if we had them. So we do about maybe 8 or 10 a year. Is kind of a busy year for safety and ed. All right, so GMS, that's our grant management system. It's created by DOT IT. So the IT folks over there, they have a huge IT program. So our 3rd year using it, actually going into our 4th year now. This will be our 4th year we just started. So, and it's integrated with the state payment system. So when you apply for reimbursement, it gets sent out pretty easily. This is important, not as important now, so they say, but I still recommend using Internet Explorer. We've had a few glitches, so it's really important if you are applying, look and make sure everything looks right when you go through your application. We will help you review them, but if it's a final application and there were some big changes you made and then you submitted it and it's, you know, there were some problems with truncated fields and it only got copying and pasting doesn't work well sometimes if you're not using the right program. So we still recommend using Internet Explorer, but you know, it's supposed to work with Chrome now, but I'm just still going to tell people to use Internet Explorer. All right, so that's our regional folks again. This kind of gets back to the whole thing. I have this slide in here a couple of times for a reason, because this is what happens a lot is you don't work with your local trail specialist. And we will tell you our honest opinion of how strong a project we think it'll be. We'll get into that with some trends later. I already mentioned that greenways, you know, are not going to go so well necessarily. So if you come to us with a project and we're paying for 1/10 of a mile of a paved greenway, you know, that's not as competitive when you can get an 8 to 10 mile mountain bike, you know, trail system for similar money. So that's something that's really important. I'll say it a couple of times, work with your trail specialist. So this is what it looks like. And I'm not going to go through this. I pulled a lot of these slides out. But we have a resource like this, and I'm going to update it because things change a little bit. But I do a lot of PowerPoint stuff where I draw arrows and I'm trying to walk you through exactly how to apply in the grant management system. So this is what it looks like on the little image on the right, but we have a step-by-step guide that I'm going to be updating to help walk you through how to apply. And it has, you know, helpful things like, you know, there's how you create a new application, edit existing application, things like that. So it's a kind of doesn't look great, you know, it's very, very governmental looking, but it works. So that's essentially what the application looks like. You just go through and fill it out. But again, we have a step-by-step guide that walks you through this part, but we also have a guidance document that kind of gets into more detail about each question and each piece. So another pitfall here. Supporting documents. So we have 3 packets that we want people to upload. If you upload every single attachment in there that you just think, maybe they want to see this, or maybe they'll want to look at this. We have some specific guidelines on what should be in each packet. And each one of these packets here should be its own just PDF packet. So if you don't know how to combine, you know, if you can't take 4 maps and put them together into one packet, you find somebody, you can Google it. It's not that hard. But we have real specific guidelines on how to upload the attachments, because the Trails Committee, who's the ones that are deciding whether or not they like your project and what kind of score to give it, are having to go through in the GMS system and look at that. And every time an attachment is uploaded, it stays there. It can't be deleted. So we ask you to work offline, get all your packets together, get everything done and polished just like you want it, and then upload it. Because if you have to wade through, you know, 30 attachments and you can't find the newest version, it can be a little tough, and it could result in potentially penalizing your project. All right, so now I want to talk about the story of your project. So I'm going to give an example. I'm not going to single out anybody else. That we're going to talk about Grandfather Mountain State Park applied for a project. So has anybody ever, I want to ask, because normally I would ask people, if you've been on the Profile Trail before, it's a very, very popular trail in Grandfather Mountain. This is what you probably saw on part of the Profile Trail. So I'm pretty sure that trail needs a lot of work. Everybody else agreed, the committee agreed. So we've been investing some money into this. So this is part of telling the story. It's okay. I've changed the map packet to maps and visuals now. So if you want to include a few very telling photos, I think it'd be helpful for the committee. So this really stands out as being a problem. I think we all agree. Lots of twisted ankles, great places for you. I've hiked this, great places to wedge your ankle in there, and then you fall forward, and next thing you know, you're getting carried out by some park rangers and EMS. So this is what we asked for, good maps. That's kind of a project overview map here. So this kind of orients you to the area. And again, we break all this down in the guidelines. Then you zoom in a little bit and it's very clear which section of the trail we're going to be working on, that highlighted red area. And then we have some with good topo that explains why there might be a problem. Anybody that knows trail design, that's a fall line trail. And the reason it is where it is we're a little limited by some land ownership in that area, and it just scoots right up in between some other property. It's also a very popular historic trail, so people love it. If it moved, they would probably be upset if it turned into a bunch of switchback. But now we can actually take that trail though and turn it into something much nicer. And that's some of the RTP work that's happened on the Profile Trail. So that's what we want to do. That's what you want to tell a story. So you're not going to have the end product, but you can explain to people why your project needs to be funded. So tell a good story. And if you can't look at a map, I'll say one other thing about maps. If you can't look at a map and tell basically what's going to happen in your project, you probably need to rework the map. You take the map, show it to somebody else that doesn't know what's going on. Show them the map and see if they understand what you're doing, which part of the trail you're going to work on. What is the money going to go for? What is the funding going to go for? So again, one more time, work with your trail specialist. They'll help look at your maps. You can show them the maps ahead of time, and they'll give you feedback. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about trends in the RTP program. And I'll say this just before I get into this piece, we are here to help. We will give you good feedback. We will be available. Don't reach out to us. One other pitfall, I'll say, don't look for a lot of quick response and help and dedicated time if it's 2 days before the deadline, because we are wide open in the last 2 days. It is, we're trying to help everybody, but I would highly suggest, put something on your calendar, use that soft deadline to get some good feedback. That'll help a ton. But then also try to get your final done as early as possible and work with our trail specialists, because, we have about 70 applications every time. We can only fund about 15 or 16. We get $1.4 million in funding and a max of $100,000. Then it doesn't leave a lot of room for error. There's a lot of good projects that don't quite make it. So get all the help you can. We're here to help, and please don't wait till the last day to try to get us on the phone or try to remedy whatever you're struggling with. So the earlier the better on that. But this is just the last 3 years. So with this GMS system, we don't have tons of trends. We're trying to dive into this, and I just worked with our guy in Tableau, our database guy, to try to create this. And we're starting to get more data. So we've been in GMS for 3 years. We'll be in another year. So we've got good data we're starting to mine out. And this is just an example I thought would be good to show some of the trends we're seeing. And that's all the RTP projects across the state. So you probably noticed some things really, really quickly. The western part of the state is a lot busier than the eastern part of the state. And if you look at the Great Trail State connections, it was interesting to me that some of these holes in this map, northeast and southeastern North Carolina, there's big gaps there, and there's reasons for that. I mean, it's lower density population. It's also very low and wet. So there's a lot of challenges to getting across. And if you look at the braided channels of the different river basins, you can see other challenges as well. So there's a reason for these gaps, but we are trying to get more things to happen in in coastal North Carolina. So there are big populations, around the Asheville area. The mountain region is very busy. We have sometimes twice as many applications from the mountain region. The Piedmont is also very busy though. We have a lot of good projects, and this is just the last 3 years. So I will show you a couple of slides gets a little deeper into the last 3 years. And then I'll go show you a live version of this real quick. So that is our 2019 funding. And coastal didn't do so good that year. There was only 2 that were attempting to get funding, and they didn't get selected this particular time, but they do a little better in the next couple of years. But this is data that I can share with our Trails Committee. So we can show trends over time. They can take that for consideration for other projects. But one thing you don't see in here is there's no paddle accesses in this one. But we're required to give 30% of our funding to OHV. So that is always going to be about 30%. We're supposed to hit that mark. But that shows the amount of money that was asked for and the amount of money that was given out. So, 2019, that's a pretty typical year, but usually we do have a couple coastal projects. But I'm going to give out this slideshow as well. I'll give it to Palmer or Brianna or Jesse, and they can distribute it. So y'all will be able to get this. This was 2020, and that was essentially 3 coastal projects. The green is Piedmont, and the light brown there is the mountain project. So you'll see all the OHV projects. We have 4 of them, so usually we have to give them about $400,000 every year. And you can see the primary user groups and all that. We try to break it up pretty good at diverse use, mountain biking, hiking. There's a lot of mountain biking and hiking requests. And then there's also a couple of canoe kayak ones. All right, and that's our 2021. So we're essentially going into the next fiscal year is going to be 2022. So even though this is 2021, we're going to be funding projects for the 2022 federal fiscal year this next cycle. So this is what we had last year. You'll notice the dollar figure is a lot more. We pushed back on a lot of applicants that were not using the funds, and they turned the funds back in, and we ended up with a surplus of money. So because there is a ticking clock on this money, we decided to go ahead and give it out. So we spent a lot more money. We doubled, and we actually increased the max for the grant application because we really honestly couldn't handle to take on another 30 projects in this year if we left the max at 100,000. So we bumped it up a little bit and have about the same number of projects. We have a lot more multi-use interest in this year and a lot of Greenway interest. So this was the 2021 year. And then that's just another bigger slide to make it a little easier to see from the past 3 years. So again, you see the gaps. You see the gaps and all that right there. But what I want to show now is
Scott, I don't mean to interrupt, but we're running a little short on time.
Okay.
So if
that's like my last
can
slide.
folks access this interactive map in the with a link, or is it internal?
They cannot. It's really for me, but I don't need to get into that. I'm happy just to go ahead and let it. We can finish up there because I just had 2 more slides.
Okay.
But yeah.
Well, just any closing comments.
That's it.
Okay.
Sure, that's it. And that's if you got any questions, that's the newest variant of the coronavirus right there as well.
Well, good. Well, if we have some time at the end, we can get back to these questions and just take a peek at the chat box. There's a question about ADA accessibility. If you got anything to weigh in on, there's a side discussion going on that, but I really appreciate kind of looking under the hood for the Recreational Trails Program and what you guys have been working on over the last couple of years. So
absolutely. I will look at the chat and I will stop sharing my screen right now and let y'all.
Okay, great.
Move forward. Good.
And then Pete, I think you were up next. You've got, you should have co-host privileges to go ahead and start sharing your screen. And we're excited to have Pete Eshelman from north of the border. And I noticed in the chat box when folks are saying where they're from, we got folks from South Carolina, all across North Carolina, Massachusetts. So I'll turn it over to you, Pete, to talk about what you guys have been doing for a number of years up in Roanoke. Appreciate your time.
Cool.
I can see your screen.
Yeah. Everybody see my screen? Good. Thank you. Good morning. I always love the opportunity to kind of tell our story. So I'm going to dive into it for the sake of time. So my name is Pete Eshelman. I'm from Roanoke, Virginia, and I was kind of asked to share examples of how our community, which is comprised of 8 different localities, how we're kind of leveraging our outdoor assets, our lakes, our rivers, our mountains and trails, to create an economic sector centered around the outdoors and outdoor recreation and that active lifestyle. And then how that shift in our kind of community narrative, our community brand, if you will, is kind of attracting talent and business investment to the area. And along the way, I'll kind of share some of the creative ways that we're funding kind of outdoor projects and initiatives that are different than kind of what you guys have been talking about already. So, up until, let's see if my screen's moving here. Hold on one second. My screen is not moving. Let's.
I sometimes run into problems when you have got two shared screens or doing extend display.
No, I'm just on a laptop. It's like it's locked up. You can hear me though. Let me stop sharing.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll try coming back in again. I've never had this happen before. Apologies, everyone. I won't advance.
No problem. Okay.
Maybe you could hand it off to somebody else and they could present.
There we go.
It's just me in the office today. So, but thank you. So up until 10 years ago, I think if Roanoke was known for anything, it was known for being a rail town. But I think it was more that we just didn't have an image, and because we didn't have one, we were known for our largest employer at the time, which was a major railroad corporation. So, but after kind of a lot of seed planting, a lot of consensus building, and really a lot of collaboration, we've been able to change our community narrative to one that now plays to our strengths, which is the great outdoors. So my plan today is to kind of tell our story, hopefully give you a few good ideas to take home with you. And this is pretty much the same story that I tell our elected officials, business leaders, civic groups on a regular basis, pretty much anybody that'll listen to us, with a goal of elevating how trails and rivers are viewed and hopefully moving them up the funding priority ladder. So in 2009, our business leaders had the foresight and vision to kind of challenge our regional economic development organization, which I'm a part of, to reevaluate our approach to economic development, to ensure that we're really being progressive in our approach and really play into our strengths. And so the result was the realization that we live in a truly beautiful place, like most of you do as well, but we were treating it just like wallpaper. It was nice to look at, but nothing more. So the vision was to turn our mountains, our lakes, our rivers, our trails into tools for economic growth. And that's kind of where I came into the picture. So my program was started in 2009, again, by the Regional Economic Development Organization, of which I'm the director of outdoor branding for. And then in 2013, this program evolved into our nonprofit arm called Roanoke Outside. So, but what I like to say I do is I actually try to get people to go for a hike or a bike ride or a paddle, and in the process make Roanoke the place that people and businesses want to be. So within the economic development world, I'm kind of what's referred to as a non-traditional economic developer, because everything we're doing doesn't kind of fit into that traditional economic development bucket. So my focus is centered on asset-based economic development, and then kind of leveraging our natural assets to attract, as I said earlier, business investment and talent, while also kind of shaping and changing our global brand. So I think over the course of the past several years, we've seen a successful change in our community narrative to one that recognizes our outdoor assets as one of our greatest strengths. And I think so the outdoors, really, it's now part of our community's DNA, and our entire community, from elected officials to business leaders, recognize that rivers and trails are much more than dirt and water. So as you guys probably know, communities across the country are recognizing that investing in livability and outdoor infrastructure is really integral to attracting business and talent. And so if you look at this chart, you can see that our outdoor assets, they have an impact on the different areas that will help kind of create a future economic success for the region. These are the areas that our region envisions focusing on. So for a small metro like us, the opportunities to find an asset that resonates and produces is difficult, let alone one that touches 8 different localities from corner to corner. So we're really incredibly fortunate to have this asset, and it represents the greatest opportunity to make the Roanoke region the place that people want to be. So for years, communities, they've measured their economic success in purely kind of more traditional economic terms, number of jobs created, rising incomes, the number of business relocations, but recently, other things have entered the equation. Placemaking efforts in communities across the globe are really beginning to emphasize quality of life or quality of place. And communities are investing in everything from better parks and bike lanes to arts and cultural venues, all to really help kind of retain talent and in the process bolster residents' happiness. So for us, it's all about having this collective story and then creating environments to get as many people as possible telling that same story. And so I like to use the analogy of a pie when I kind of started down this path. I spent 2 months just kind of talking with all the different user groups out there. And I use the analogy of a pie that we had all these different groups that were focused on their slice of the pie. So the people focused on Greenway building, a paved paths versus trail builders versus the mountain bike community, the fly fishing community, the hiking community. They were all kind of doing great things with their little slice of the pie, but no one was kind of representing the whole pie. And that's where we've kind of been able to come in and let them realize that what's good for the Greenway community is also good for the fly fishing community. So everybody's kind of, the whole rising tides lift all ships analogy kind of comes into play. And so we're all kind of pushing that same agenda forward now. And that's kind of where that collective voice comes into play. So the end result is that we've developed this network of stakeholders, all of whom have a vested interest in the outdoors, growing the population, and or attracting and retaining talent to the area. So our stakeholders, they range from parks and recreation departments to human resource departments. We work with guides, outfitters, nonprofits, clubs, local governments, tourism organizations, state and federal land managers, all the way down to helping a passionate resident start a rowing club. And we're giving them the tools to help them grow. Because as a community, our success is tied directly to their success. They're the ones that are helping kind of shape and craft our community and our community narrative. So onto the why and how, and I think this is an important part of capacity building because your community, both the private and public sectors need to understand the power of the outdoor industry if you're going to get their support. So kind of why the outdoors, more than 3 out of 4 Americans engage in some form of outdoor recreation. And I think during this pandemic, that number has skyrocketed, as you all know. So for us, the outdoors is that common asset that connects our entire region from rural to urban. And it's probably the case for a lot of you as well. So all this getting outside translates to big dollars. It's an overlooked economic giant, really. It's a $887 billion a year industry employing 1 out of 20 people. I'm not sure how accurate these are, but North Carolina, that translates to 28 billion in consumer spending, about 260,000 jobs, and 1.3 billion in state and local tax revenue. And that's just the stuff that's connected directly to the outdoor industry. It doesn't take into effect how the outdoors affects companies that have nothing to do with the outdoors, yet it affects their talent attraction or their employee culture, or it affects their decision on where to locate because they want to locate in an area with a high quality of life. So for us, it was pretty easy to make that connection with the outdoors. We live in a beautiful place. You guys live in a beautiful place, but for the longest time, as I said earlier, we were treating the beauty of where we live like wallpaper. It's nice to look at, but nothing more. And, by kind of investing in that within some intentional efforts, we've been able to make a significant change. And so the Roanoke of today is way different than it was 5 years ago, let alone 15 to 20 years ago. 20 years ago, if someone asked to describe Roanoke, the railroad, as I said earlier, would be part of that description, but maybe not the mountains and trails. Over the past years, we've transitioned from a rail town to a trail town. We're home to one of the world's toughest marathons. And they're really thanks to a regional commitment to improving our bicycle infrastructure. We're bronze level bicycle friendly, working towards silver. On the mountain bike front, we're a silver level IMBA Ride Center as well. We have 30 plus miles of urban pathways connecting our neighborhood, 5 blueways spanning the region. So our community narrative has changed, again, with a high focus on quality of life. So kind of how did we reach the point where the outdoors is part of who we are and as a community, where we're no longer building that outdoor brand, and that brand that we've worked hard to build is now shaping and building our community. And I think the simplest explanation is that we really started conversations. Our goal has really been to create a climate that increases awareness of the benefits of the outdoors and creates an opportunity for business and investment. And again, elevates how our community views it. And then that raises their willingness to invest in it because the community is speaking loud and clear to them that this is something that they place a high value on. So as a community, we had to ask ourselves, what are our assets? And then how, again, as a community, are we supporting and nurturing them? How are we taking them from wallpaper to an active tool that helps grow the economy? And this is the format that we've been using to develop our region's outdoor brand. But as we like to say around our office, we're building the plane as we fly it. So it's a constant, ever evolving process. But we use this formula again to start those conversations, plant seeds, open eyes, connect user groups, and really kind of create a collective voice for the outdoors. So you have to know what's in your own backyard, and you have to make it incredibly easy for people to connect with them. That's been a big focus of ours. We have millions of acres of public lands. We have miles of blueways trails, lakes, the second largest municipal park in the U.S., which is home to 60 miles of single track trails located 15 minutes from downtown. Mentioned our Greenway system, the Blue Ridge Parkway. We have 6 state parks, kind of within an hour radius, and then more than 1,000 miles of trails, including the Appalachian Trail as well. So you need to be asking yourself, what's in your backyard and how are you making it easy for people to connect with those? So we took inventory of all these, put it on a website. The world needs more websites. Everybody knows that. But we use this website to kind of help tell our story. So it's a resource for residents, visitors, site consultants from businesses and companies that are researching the area, and tourists as well. And then you also have to be looking for gaps or things that are standing in your way, things that need to change as well as opportunities. So from simple things like changing the location that a person pays a fee to access a trail system, to identifying that we didn't have an indoor climbing gym and then working with a developer to make that happen. So, we want to have an authentic outdoor culture, and, we're always on the lookout for ways to make this happen. Brand building events is an area that we've had some pretty good successes. So kind of through this gap analysis, we identified that we didn't have any signature outdoor events in our region that would attract people to come visit or give people a reason to come visit from outside our region, let alone outside of the state lines. And so we started some series of events. The first one, as I mentioned, is America's Toughest Road Marathon. We track and we, figure out the economic impact. It has a $5.8 million economic impact. We've had 14,000 runners from 50 states and 31 countries. That goes back into our image building. So we're doing this not from a tourism standpoint. Everybody thinks, oh, marathon tourism. We're doing it more from an image building. How are people going to consider, kind of locating in Roanoke or moving there, visiting there if they've never heard of it before? So part of our goal is to get on their radar. And so that's kind of where the community, the image building aspect comes into play. So I'm going to start moving fast because I know that we're getting up against a timeline here, but we did the same thing with a cyclocross race. Again, 29 states and 5 countries were represented last year, about an $800,000 economic impact last year. Probably one of our bigger events that attracts about 40,000 people is an outdoor festival. And It's a totally free festival, and that's because part of our goal and mission is to get more people living a healthy, active lifestyle. And so we didn't want cost to be a barrier to entry. We wanted people to be able to come here, discover new activities, test out new equipment. An interesting side note is kind of some of the creative ways that we're kind of helping fund some project is the local mountain bike club. They volunteer and they manage all the beer pouring aspects of the festival in exchange for a cut of the proceeds. So they pour the beer for the festival, and we've been able to give them more than $100,000 to their club, which goes back into making the trails better. They're the ones that are out there building and maintaining the trails, and so they're able to put that money to good use with their motto of more better trails. So earlier, I talked about the importance of stakeholders or any one person or club or organization that's contributing to your outdoor cultures. It's really important that you take care of them and give them the tools to be successful. Jump ahead because I know I'm getting up against some time. This is probably where we spend the most time here, and the brand building events contribute to that. But it's centered around building that local support, because without the local support and buy-in from our residents, our outdoor brand's not going to be sustainable, and our community isn't going to step up and fund projects in this outdoor space if they don't see the value in that. So our goal has always been to turn our residents into our ambassadors and our advocates, so that when someone travels from Roanoke and they're asked, what's it like there? We want the outdoors to be the part of the story that they tell. So we focus heavily on educating our residents on what's right here in their own backyard and making it easy for them to connect with it. So we're a mouthpiece for everything happening in the outdoors. We do weekly newsletters, social media. We have a whole internal marketing campaign, which internal means focused on our residents. We have an external campaign, which is outside of the area, which is focused more on businesses locations, relocations. And it's working. We were in Outside Magazine, 6 Habits of Highly Successful Cities not too long ago. And this is earned media, which means we didn't pay anything to get on this list. It happened organically, which if you're in the marketing world, that's something that you hope happens for you. So that was pretty exciting to see that happen. So I'm going to share some of the things that have happened over the past several years as a result of our region kind of really embracing this outdoor brand and then kind of collectively tell our story. So we've had 31 new outdoor businesses have opened their doors since we started doing this, and employment in that sector has grown 18% since 2010, whereas it only grew 3.9% at the state level and 14.5% nationally. So we're pretty proud of that. I mentioned our Greenway system. It's a great example of where our community is stepping up and letting their voices be heard, that they want to see this funded and completed. We're actively developing an 1,100-acre active outdoor recreation park. This is being developed by one of our Roanoke County Parks and Recreation. This wouldn't have happened 10 years ago if our local government and elected officials didn't understand the importance of the outdoor industry to us as a community. I mentioned the climbing gym. We worked with the developer. This was built with historic tax credits. So if you guys play in that world at all, you can build a climbing gym with historical tax credits. I mentioned our 5 Blueways in the region. We have one locality that's hired a full-time Blueway coordinator to develop their water assets. I mentioned our bicycle friendly. In 2007, we had 1.1 miles of bike lanes. Now there's 47.9 miles of bike lanes. So again, the city's commitment to making that happen, which again wouldn't have happened 10 years ago. It's happening because the community is voicing that that's important to them, and they want to see that happen. Lots of trails. For the most part, these are all maintained by volunteers. Roanoke City, again, because of the elevated profile of the outdoors, they hired a full-time trail building manager of volunteers, and then they just created 3 new staff support positions to support that. So there's 4 people in the city that are working on trails building and maintenance. I mentioned the Silver Level Ride Center. That wouldn't have happened if our city really wasn't committed to that and understanding the importance of it. We've branched out more to focus on inclusiveness as well. We've started several kind of outdoor mentor programs designed to connect a new generation with the outdoors. And then the past few years, we've been looking more at our outdoor infrastructure and how we can improve access to the outdoors. we also recognize that we can't rely solely on public dollars to build community assets. So we've turned to our residents and are getting them to pitch in their own dollars. You guys have heard the term crowdfunding. This was our first crowdfunding project right here. Through $50, $100 donations, we raised about 80 grand to build this. This was built on private property, and then it was donated to the city. And so it basically became a public park afterwards, and the city maintains it now. So that's kind of a cool thing to see happen. With leftover funds, we've contributed to 3 other river access projects, and we funded an in-river kayak feasibility study as well. And then 2 years ago, we had a company that manufactures rowing accessories. Just kind of showing you how it comes a little bit full circle here. Manufacturing rowing accessories relocate here. They kind of approach us with the idea of raising money to install a low-profile dock at one of our reservoirs, which improves access to the water. And so in 3 months, our community chipped in and raised the funds to build this. And now that company is in the process of developing a rowing club because that opened up a whole new access and avenue for them as well. So we're excited to see that happen. Last spring, we raised funds again through crowdfunding to build the first phase of a bike park in kind of a forgotten city park that really had been overrun with homeless camps and drug use. So we did cleanups in this park, and the amount of needles we were finding. The sad part is it was right next to the Boys and Girls Club. The Boys and Girls Club stopped using the park because of that. But now we've turned it into an active park, and we are just received a grant to build phase 2 of this park as well. And the Boys and Girls Club received a grant to start a mountain bike program within their club as well. About 18 months ago, we hired a consulting firm to kind of conduct a regional outdoor impact infrastructure and investment study, which basically means they helped us identify, opportunities for improvement as well as areas of concern. And one of the key takeaways of this assessment was the need to adequately fund the maintenance and development of our natural assets. So, people like to fund shiny new things, but not necessarily the ongoing maintenance that comes with that. And because of the groundwork we had been doing over the previous years, our public sector leaders, they understand the need for dedicated funding for the outdoor maintenance and any kind of investment in new capital infrastructure projects. And so we were having great conversations on this. We were identifying, the goal was to identify new pots of money. We didn't want to take from one pot to put into another one. We wanted to find new funding stream. And we were making great headway on this, and then the pandemic hit. So kind of forced the big pause button on that. But as you all know, if the pandemic has shown us anything, it's that our outdoor assets and access to them is more important now than ever. The pandemic has created a lot of firsts for all of us, including first-time outdoor users. Our parks and open spaces have seen upwards of 200% increase in use during this time. And as I said, while it seems like this is something we should be celebrating, the fact that more people are getting outside, it is awesome. But it's actually generating a kind of even additional kind of sudden unanticipated wear and tear on these already overtaxed resources. So, these parks, rivers, greenways, public spaces, they don't bounce back on their own. So unfortunately for us, our region isn't investing in them at the rate that will allow us to capitalize them on as a community strength. And that's kind of why we were going down this path of the dedicated funding. But again, that pause button was hit. So we took kind of what I deem this pandemic as being as a giant truckload of lemons that we call COVID, and we made lemonade this past fall. We created Project Outside as a new community fund that allows individuals and businesses to support maintenance of key outdoor assets and kind of invest in new outdoor infrastructure projects and to help launch and support businesses in the outdoor sector. So we set up a platform that allows citizens to make monthly donations to the cause. So kind of reoccurring donations. So it'll be an ongoing thing. So it's somewhat sustainable. And then, so we now have, everything from like local bike shops that are donating $10 from every bike sold. Some retailers are donating a percentage of their monthly sales in a set month to it. Existing events, they're donating portions of their proceeds. Breweries are donating some portions, all the way up to our largest corporations. They're making pledges of financial support. And I think, so it's why are they doing that? And I think it's because they get now, because of the years of groundwork that we've laid, that they understand that the rivers and trails they're more than dirt and water. They understand that how it affects our community culture, and then they're also seeing how it affects their bottom line, whether it's financial or on their talent attraction and retention. So to date, this fund has raised $115,000. Not a lot in the scheme of things, but for a community of our size, it's good. So next week we're going to be awarding 14 projects, ranging from everything from building a new river access point to starting a new outdoor program for underserved youth. It runs the gamut of these projects, to supporting that climbing gym, which was shut down for 6 months but still kept their employees fully employed. So we're giving them some COVID relief out of these funds as well, because they're really integral to our community narrative. So and again, these 14 projects that we're able to fund, they wouldn't have happened if we hadn't gotten creative with how we're funding the outdoors, and giving our residents a way to step in and put their money into projects that they deem valuable. So we have a saying in our office that we own and control nothing except thought and influence. So we're really, we're connectors of ideas and opportunities within our community. So that is my contact information. I'm an open book. My door is always open if anybody ever wants to reach out to me. I love sharing ideas and learning from other communities of what they're doing. So with that, I know that I'm at 2 minutes past, but I'm going to end mine.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Pete. That was a great presentation. I think someone said it best. Wow. In the chat. So really doing a lot of great things just north of our region here in North Carolina. We've, a lot of time ends at 11:30, but we'll stay on as long as folks want to. So, because I think there's a lot of good conversation going here and good ideas and just amazing. So thanks to all the presenters, and Pete, especially you donating your time this morning. I was curious, and folks have questions, please pop them in the chat. I set up some questions ahead of the presentation about how you're capitalizing on the success. Obviously, you shared some ideas through crowdsourced funding over the few years, and the foundation that's set up last fall to get projects, whether it's for maintenance or COVID relief or whatnot. But just how are you going to continue to capitalize on that? Are you leveraging state and federal dollars, for example, with that money? Or are you trying to keep it more local so you don't have to worry about all the reporting that goes along with state and federal?
Well, that's where our partners and stakeholders come into play, so our, all the local governments, they're the ones that play in that sandbox. And so we just kind of help and support them in that role. Now, when it comes down to, so the project aside, that's you guys are probably familiar with 1% for the Planet, where these businesses, donate a percentage of their sales to conservation, based nonprofits throughout the U.S. and world. And that's kind of our goal, is to grow that as a way that businesses and individuals can contribute to that. So that's just one thing. We're going to keep developing that, set that aside, keep doing that. But then coming back to the larger, that dedicated funding, Virginia is a very pain in the butt state to do anything, because it's a Dillon rule state, things like that. So to do anything when you're looking at dedicated funding or things like that, cities can do things that counties can't do, and vice versa. And and I'm not a bureaucrat. I hate playing in that world, but that's kind of what we're going down and figuring out what that looks like, and kind of what those options can be, again, to identify new funding streams.
Yeah, great. Good. Appreciate that. Yeah, it's a challenge. It's complex for sure, but lots of great things. So I think we are over on time, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. But there's a few questions in the chat box, and thank you so much for folks answering those questions as they've come in. I think that's really helped since we did go over time. But and Brianna, are we pulling up the Great State Trails Coalition information? Are we out of time for that? Let me just double check here.
I think if people can stick around, we'll do a quick plug.
Okay, so we're gonna continue on for a few more minutes to talk a little bit about some statewide efforts. But again, thanks so much to our speakers. We've got some great information. We'll of course share all that information, the presentations, contact information in a follow-up email, and please do give us feedback on how to improve these. through these sessions going forward. And so I'll turn it back over to Palmer to talk a little bit about a Great Trail State Coalition, which is a little different than the plan that Joe touched on earlier. This is kind of the next level of effort to bring some of those projects to life.
Thanks, Jesse. And yeah, thanks, Pete, Joe, and Scott. It's just such great information. So something we've been working on in North Carolina for the past maybe year and a half is that a lot of different trail organizations, people involved in trails have been talking about, well, how can we get the state of North Carolina to maybe make some more direct investments in trail facilities all across the state. Y'all may know that North Carolina does receive federal pass-through money through RTP and through DOT, but the state does not provide any direct dollars towards trail projects other than some DOT planning funds. So we started talking about maybe how we can move the needle on that. And so we have adopted this brand, this logo, the Great Trail State Coalition. We have a large steering group. Brianna, you can go to the next slide. It's a broad, diverse coalition committed to bringing the benefits of trails to all of North Carolina. It builds on DOT's Great Trail State Plan, but it's more expansive because it includes all trail types. So not just the paved pathways that's in the DOT plan, but also the natural surface trails. So hike, bike, walk, run, paddle, ride, mountain bikes, horses, all 100 counties. So we have a lot of different groups already involved. Regional trail organizations, a lot state trail friends groups, East Coast Greenway Alliance, the Conservation Fund, Friends of Mountains and Sea Trail. We've got the Outdoor Recreation Industry Coalition as well involved. So we feel good about where we're going with our direction. And Brianna, if you can go to the next slide. We have prepared a map of, and we're calling them investment ready projects. We sent out surveys last spring to all across the state, trying to gather information so we can show our elected officials, hey, we've got all these projects that are ready to go. We're not using the term shovel ready just because of all the bureaucratic baggage that goes with that term, but these are investment ready projects. If they had an infusion of funding, they could be implemented on the ground and going and benefiting communities in a pretty short time frame, within 3 years. And then also another color on the map are communities that have done the planning. And as y'all heard from Joe, particularly the planning part is so important. So once you have those plans done, it cues you up to get in line for funding for the projects. Okay, next slide. So our platform is this, again, there's no state funding other than limited DOT planning funds. Trails have been extremely popular. I mean, we do have data in our state that some trails of use has been up 328% since over 2019 numbers. But so our platform is asking for some dollars from the state government. So on the DOT side, 30 million non-recurring and 15 million recurring to leverage new federal dollars. This investment of 45 million could leverage somewhere in the neighborhood of 300 million new federal dollars that we're not getting right now. So we're trying to pitch it like that. Natural surface trail side, 10 million non-recurring and 5 million recurring for natural surface trails. We also are asking for 2 million for rural trail planning for feasibility studies. So particularly trail projects in rural communities where the funding is more challenging, get those ready for construction. And we've also brought in Visit NC on the tourism side, $250,000 to build a Great Trail State website where people can access information about trails and also the amenities in the area for things to do before and after they use trails. And then another piece of this agenda is to designate 2023 officially as the North Carolina Year of the Trail. And the purpose behind that designation is to provide an opportunity to celebrate all of our trails across the state. We want every jurisdiction and every organization to be thinking about special programming events you can do during this year. We want to get a lot of media coverage during the year, get our elected officials out on trails, and really just promote and highlight our trails. And state parks has already selected trails as their theme for that year of 2023. And we're actually pushing that through the General Assembly right now. So we have ambitious goals. We're not sure where they'll go, but really we want to do what Pete's doing up in Roanoke, is show that our elected officials in particular, that these are assets that help increase economic value in communities as well as quality of life. And so we're trying to connect those dots because not everyone always connects them. And so that's what we're up to at the state level. We invite groups to get involved. We want to build this coalition. We'll have a website soon, and we'll provide some links to sign on to what we're doing and hopefully get y'all involved and to advocate for this with your local elected officials. And I think that's the last slide, right, Brianna? Oh, we've got some more sessions coming up. Okay, so this is the last plug. Be sure to tune in. Next week is about health. We've got Mark Fenton all the way from Massachusetts coming in. He's a national health consultant and has worked a lot with urban design and the trails. Mary Jo Pugh and Sam Varner from Randolph County are going to talk about some really neat work they're doing about getting people out on trails. And then we'll move into a little bit more marketing. This might sort of follow what Pete was talking about today. We've got David Cayley from the Progress Fund in Pennsylvania. And then we've got Leslie Schneider from Elkin and Heidi Walters from Visit NC. And then finally, we'll round it out on March 26th with some sort of nuts and bolts trail planning, designing, and building with Tim Johnson, who's with Destination by Design. So please come back and join us on all Fridays in March and look up for our field trips too. We appreciate everyone's support and your interest, and we'll reach out to you with the recording as soon as we get that all set. Thanks, everybody.